and Greek philosophy was identical, and that Greek philosophy grew out of the Egyptian mysteries. 4. How the African continent gave its culture to the Western world. As mentioned elsewhere, the Egyptian mysteries and the philosophical schools of Greece were closed by the edicts of Theodosius in the 4th century AD and that of Justinian in the 6th century AD, i.e. 529. And as a consequence, intellectual darkness spread over Christian Europe and the Greco-Roman world for 10 centuries, during which time knowledge had disappeared. As stated elsewhere, the Greeks showed no creative powers and were unable to improve upon the knowledge which they had received from the Egyptians. During the Persian, Greek, and Roman invasions, large numbers of Egyptians fled not only to the desert and mountain regions, but also to adjacent lands in Africa, Arabia, and Asia Minor, where they lived and secretly deployed the teachings which belonged to their mystery system. In the 8th century AD, the Moors, i.e. natives of Mauritania in North Africa, invaded Spain and took with them the Egyptian culture which they had preserved. Knowledge in the ancient days was centralized, i.e. it belonged to a common parent and system, i.e. the wisdom teachings or mysteries of Egypt, which the Greeks used to call Sophia. As such, the people of North Africa were the neighbors of the Egyptians and became the custodians of Egyptian culture, which they spread through considerable portions of Africa, Asia Minor, and Europe. During their occupation of Spain, the Moors displayed with considerable credit the grandeur of African culture and civilization. The schools and libraries which they established became famous throughout the medieval world. Science and learning were cultivated and taught. The schools of Cordova, Toledo, Seville, and Saragossa attained such celebrity that they, like their parent Egypt, attracted students from all parts of the Western world, and from them arose the most famous African professors that the world has ever known in medicine, surgery, astronomy, and mathematics. But these people from North Africa did more than merely distinguish themselves in Spain. They were really the recognized custodians of African culture, to whom the world looked for enlightenment. Consequently, through the medium of the ancient Arabic language, philosophy, and the various branches of science were disseminated. All the so-called works of Aristotle in metaphysics, moral philosophy, and natural science, translations by Leonardo Pisano in Arabic, mathematical science, translation by Gedeo, a monk of Arezzo, in musical notation. In addition, the Moors kept up constant contact with Mother Egypt, for they had established caliphates not only at Baghdad and Cordova, but also at Cairo in Egypt. Just here it would be well to mention that all the great leaders of the great religions of antiquity were initiates of the Egyptian mystery system, from Moses, who was an Egyptian hieroglyphic, down to Christ. It should also be of interest to know that European scientists like Roger Bacon, Johannes Kepler, Copernicus, and others obtained their science through Arab or Berber sources. It is also noteworthy that through the Middle Ages, European knowledge of medicine came from these sources. End of chapter 3.
At first, we thought there were tombs for the pharaohs, but we've never found a corpse, leading to the question, why in God's name do the Egyptians spend decades building gigantic triangular structures? And what was their freaking purpose? The mystery doesn't stop there though, because there's pyramids all over the world, as if someone had just taken a stamp and just stamped it everywhere on Earth. There's far more pyramids in Sudan than Egypt, and there's even more pyramids in South America than the rest of the world combined. It's as if pyramids were a fashion style in ancient times. You know what else is crazy though? We actually found an Egyptian mummy whom tested positive for cocaine. And the plant that you make cocaine from is not native to Egypt. It's only native to the Americas. The fun only starts there though. We've got the top 8 mysteries of the pyramids coming right at you. Number 1. 8-sided pyramid insanity. This is one of those facts that, when stated, will cause people to hate on you and attempt to pompously correct you on, but is genuinely true. Like tomatoes being a fruit, that the biggest desert in the world is Antarctica, or that French people are actually quite polite. Okay, that last one was a lie, but get this. In 1940, a British pilot discovered that each of the 4 sides of the Great Pyramid were actually split in 2 by a concave indentation, creating 8 equal sides. Even weirder is that these discrepancies are only detectable at dawn and sunset on the spring and autumn equinoxes when the sun casts its shadow. This means the Egyptians had a solid understanding of the solar cycle and advanced mathematics, but this still doesn't explain one important aspect of the discovery. Why is it only visible from above? Who is this a demonstration for? Their gods? Ancient big-ass ballers? Or a mysterious other? Number 2. Earth, not Egypt. One thing that stands out amongst pyramid-building cultures is that they all possessed advanced knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and the Earth's geophysical properties. Basically, they were antiquity's greatest nerds, except without the distraction of Star Trek fan theory and Japanese tentacle porn. There are even similar-looking pyramids in Italy, Giza, China, and South America, which are all themselves strikingly similar to Cambodian temples and Indonesian structures. It's like someone just pressed copy and paste a whole bunch of times and hoped no one would notice. Well, just like your college professor, yes, we did notice. How can all these cultures build in such a similar style during one particular period of Earth's history when most of our architecture differs so greatly from country to country? Some people point to the idea of a theoretical hive mind, a global collective consciousness which helped different races form the same ideas without ever contacting each other. This kind of societal consciousness has been seen in the animal kingdom. Could we humans all be connected too, in some way? But in a way far more efficient than the human centipede? And is this why we've built the same unnecessarily large structures around the world over and over again? Or perhaps was there some other reason? Number 3. Giant tombs stamped everywhere? Now let's think about that a little bit more. No bodies have ever been found in the Great Pyramid or many of the other thousands of pyramids, say, for instance, in South America. The absence of corpses, which is a great band name by the way, has been attributed to grave robbers and archaeologists taking anything that wasn't nailed down. Although the idea of stealing a corpse is kind of weird to me, that still doesn't explain why the pyramids didn't contain burial items such as a sarcophagus. So what gives? Did they just change their mind? Maybe it's like the time you buy your friend an awesome gift, then realize you want to keep it, and so then buy them something crappy. Imagine I'm saying this part in an Egyptian accent, which I cannot do. Yeah, sure, Pharaoh. We'll bury you here. We promise. Don't you worry about it. Pinky swears. What? He's dead? Party at the pyramid! Woo! Okay, but if they weren't constructed as tombs, then what was the point of the pyramids? Number 4. Their purpose? It couldn't have just been big things are cool. Some speculate they were used to store grain or valuables, but any theory that believes these amazing structures were just ancient Kmarts is far too dull to explore. One interesting idea looks first at where the pyramids were built. The Egyptians constructed the Great Pyramid in the geographical center of the Earth, along specific lines of latitude and longitude, almost perfectly oriented to the 4 points of the compass, facing true north more accurately than any structure built before or since. Do they have knowledge about untapped magnetic energy centers of the Earth and try to harness it? Or something else equally as insane? It sounds like a pretty crazy idea. One credible theory, though, actually unites the pyramids of the Mayans and Egyptians with the incredible mathematical knowledge needed to build them. Pyramids from both cultures have been specifically aligned with certain star constellations. The pyramids of Giza and Teotihuacan both reflect and point to the constellation of Orion. And it's no coincidence. Both cultures believe that the stars were themselves gods. But then again, I guess so do we, considering how much people pay for a piece of tissue full of Tom Cruise's tears. Not only did they believe that the stars were gods, but that their gods actually came down and visited them from the stars. That's where that belief came from. Number 5. Secret rooms and passageways so unexplored, I'm furious. Beneath the Sphinx and within the Great Pyramid, sonar and radar technology has uncovered a few ancient secrets. They are believed to contain many small passageways which have lain untouched by man, making them the exact opposite of Miley Cyrus. So far, we have only uncovered a few of these, yet it seems strange that such a vast building would be used to house only a few small corridors and tombs. What is interesting is the lack of willingness from the Egyptians to explore these areas, though. A famous Roman geographer named Strabo reportedly found a previously unknown south entrance to the pyramid 2,000 years ago. Modern theorists claim he was mistakenly identifying the north entrance, but the guy was a world-renowned map maker. A world-renowned map maker. That's like a doctor checking you for strep throat by shoving a camera up your butt. It is simply a mistake a knowledgeable man would not make. So what do these secret rooms and passageways contain? Perhaps with more exploration and hopefully permission from the Egyptian government, we will eventually find out. Not only were the pyramids in South America built in the same way and style as those in Egypt, but many utilized identical measurement systems. And as we've already discussed, they lay on important lines of latitude and longitude. Is it out of the realms of possibility that one particular culture wanted to spread their ideas far and wide, traversing the endless oceans of the globe to spread the word of their one true God? Sounds a little bit like, Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on the door of ancient civilizations just as they were about to get in the bathtub. Imagine me with an accent right now. Hello Mayans, Hindus, would you like to hear the teachings of our giant cat lord the Sphinx? No more accent. Obviously, to accomplish this would have not only required the crossing of thousands of miles of land and ocean, also the ability to instantly command the respect of local people to build them. I mean, geez, it's hard enough asking your neighbor to borrow their power tools. You try getting him to build you a 400-foot high pyramid and see where he sticks that power saw. So were all these commonalities across ancient cultures and across the earth just due to chance? Number 7. Ancient pyramid building civilizations interacted? Now there are many theories regarding contact between old and new worlds pre-Columbus. The similarities in cultural items and the composition of pyramids found in Peru, Egypt, and those built by the Olmecs of Mexico have been noted by mainstream scientists. Is it possible they somehow made contact? We don't know a great deal about early Central and South American navigators, but we do know most Egyptian galleons of the time. The chances of them making their way over to South America using their ordinary fleet would be as likely as Nickelback releasing a decent song in the next century. However, King Sa-Her of Egypt was known to have commissioned ships as large as Christopher Columbus's Santa Maria. Now, he could have just been building huge boats to make up for his own personal shortcomings, or perhaps he had another intention. The Egyptians were expert designers and mathematicians. Could they have really traveled that far? Other African fleets, such as Mansa Musa's Malian explorers, claim to have tested the limits of the Atlantic Ocean, and some artifacts found in Mexico do bear resemblance to the African people. Then, in the 20th century, new scientific techniques enabled us to detect traces of nicotine and cocoa on Egyptian mummies. Nicotine and cocoa, which can be turned into ... cocaine. it looks like the ancient Egyptians were quite possibly getting high. Now, the more likely explanation is that they were using the cocoa for something else, but much more importantly, cocoa and tobacco are both only native to the Americas. But since they're so popular today, apparently, I mean, who knows how far indeterminately the Egyptians may have traveled in their quest. That is, assuming they traveled by boat. Number 8. Extraterrestrial Pyramid Party. Both the Mayan and Egyptian cultures record gods coming down from the sky to give them instructions to build the pyramids. But many cultures claim such meetings with deities and spirits. In fact, my local preacher claims to shake hands with the Lord every time you give him $10. Joking aside, he's basing even that claim on how God in the Bible came down from the sky and gave man instructions. And let me ask you a question. What comes down from the sky thousands of years before the Wright brothers were even born? What? Birds? Rain? So, what other theories support an extraterrestrial influence? Perhaps we have to look at the sudden growth and development of pyramid-building cultures. In both Bosnia and Siam in China, large pyramid structures have been discovered, which were originally believed to be hills. We already know that the ancient Chinese were intellectually advanced at the time, and guess what? So were the Illyrian people of prehistorical Bosnia. The Egyptians, the Mayans, the Chinese, every civilization with a history of pyramid building has been more knowledgeable and innovative than their contemporaries. Is it always the case that the most intelligent people build these giant desert triangles just for fun? Or is there another element at play here? Because you have to admit, when randomly selecting people from around the world to build the same mathematically astounding structures in perfect alignment with each other for no reason at all, it does look a little too suspicious. Who or what could have been potentially guiding these people? Check out our top 10 unsolved mysteries of the internet video. It gets pretty deep, and the number one thing on our list might just change your perspective on the world.
And Greek philosophy was identical, and that Greek philosophy grew out of the Egyptian mysteries. 4. How the African continent gave its culture to the Western world. As mentioned elsewhere, the Egyptian mysteries and the philosophical schools of Greece were closed by the edicts of Theodosius in the 4th century AD and that of Justinian in the 6th century AD, i.e. 529. And as a consequence, intellectual darkness spread over Christian Europe and the Greco-Roman world for 10 centuries, during which time knowledge had disappeared. As stated elsewhere, the Greeks showed no creative powers and were unable to improve upon the knowledge which they had received from the Egyptians. During the Persian, Greek, and Roman invasions, large numbers of Egyptians fled not only to the desert and mountain regions, but also to adjacent lands in Africa, Arabia, and Asia Minor, where they lived and secretly deployed the teachings which belonged to their mystery system. In the 8th century AD, the Moors, i.e. natives of Mauritania in North Africa, invaded Spain and took with them the Egyptian culture which they had preserved. Knowledge in the ancient days was centralized, i.e. it belonged to a common parent and system, i.e. the wisdom teachings or mysteries of Egypt, which the Greeks used to call Sophia. As such, the people of North Africa were the neighbors of the Egyptians and became the custodians of Egyptian culture, which they spread through considerable portions of Africa, Asia Minor, and Europe. During their occupation of Spain, the Moors displayed with considerable credit the grandeur of African culture and civilization. The schools and libraries which they established became famous throughout the medieval world. Science and learning were cultivated and taught. The schools of Cordova, Toledo, Seville and Saragossa attained such celebrity that they, like their parent Egypt, attracted students from all parts of the Western world, and from them arose the most famous African professors that the world has ever known in medicine, surgery, astronomy, and mathematics. But these people from North Africa did more than merely distinguish themselves in Spain. They were really the recognized custodians of African culture, to whom the world looked for enlightenment. Consequently, through the medium of the ancient Arabic language, philosophy, and the various branches of science were disseminated. All the so-called works of Aristotle in metaphysics, moral philosophy, and natural science, translations by Leonardo Pisano in Arabic mathematical science, translation by Gedale, a monk of Arezzo, in musical notation. In addition, the Moors kept up constant contact with Mother Egypt, for they had established caliphates not only at Baghdad and Cordova, but also at Cairo in Egypt. Just here it would be well to mention that all the great leaders of the great religions of antiquity were initiates of the Egyptian mystery system, from Moses, who was an Egyptian hieroglyphic, down to Christ. It should also be of interest to know that European scientists like Roger Bacon, Johannes Kepler, Copernicus, and others obtained their science through Arab or Berber sources. It is also noteworthy that through the Middle Ages, European knowledge of medicine came from these sources. End of chapter 3.
The pyramids of Giza are said to be located in the middle of the earth. Jim Allison is an independent researcher who's uncovered some mind-blowing geometry. Here he's taken the Vesica Pisces and laid it over the circle of the earth. Giza is at this point, equidistant from the North Pole and the center of the earth. Quite a central location when you see it this way. In one of the oldest surviving Hermetic fragments called the Kore Cosmu, or Virgin of the World, Isis has this to say to her son Horus. But the right holy land of our ancestors lies in the middle of the earth, and the middle of the human body is the sanctuary of the heart, and the heart is the headquarters of the soul, and that, my son, is the reason why men of this land are more wise. It could not be otherwise, seeing they are born and bred upon earth's heart. The heart of Egypt would have to be the Great Pyramid, and it embodies many more secrets. Let's investigate a few more. Here I've superimposed two instances of the same 3D model. When we draw a circle from the center of the pyramid in plan to the tip of the pyramid in elevation, something amazing happens. We square the circle. The circumference of the circle is equal to the perimeter of the square. This is a sacred diagram that encodes much wisdom. Mathematicians have proven this diagram can't be drawn perfectly because of the transcendental nature of pi. Approximations are all that is possible in flat Euclidean space. In the book The Dimensions of Paradise, John Michel has shown how the first Pythagorean triplet is the key to the wisdom encoded in this diagram. Here, 3, 4, 5 triangles set the scale and make it a very easy approximation for anyone to draw with compasses and a ruler. Now brace yourself for the wisdom. The moon and earth actually fit this diagram. The size of the moon compared to the earth is as 3 is to 11, with a 99.97% accuracy. The pyramid therefore encodes the relative sizes of moon and earth. The 3-4-5 triangle itself contains a secret that unlocks yet more of the mystery. The area of a 3-4-5 triangle is 6. 6 is one of very few perfect numbers in math, and is the only number in the infinite sea of numbers which is both the sum and product of the same three numbers. The number 6 is associated with the macrocosm, which is everything in the universe larger than the human scale. There's a simple mathematical realization that gets you from 6 to 720 that I'll skip over here. Pause the video if you love numbers. When you scale the original diagram by 720, here's what you get: the actual dimensions of the Moon and Earth in miles. The diagram says the Earth's diameter is 7,920 miles, and that's 99.97% accurate. The diagram says the Moon's diameter is 2,160 miles, and that's 99.94% accurate. That's one precise approximation. John Michel called these the canonical numbers for a good reason. When we lay this diagram over Stonehenge, we see that it fits. The dimensions of Stonehenge match the canonical numbers, but with a shifted decimal place and in English feet rather than in miles. St. Mary's Chapel in Glastonbury is another structure Michel has found that fits the canonical numbers in English feet. According to the legend, St. Joseph of Arimathea left Jerusalem after the crucifixion and traveled to the Druid Isle of Avalon, where he built the first Christian church. This was later rebuilt as St. Mary's Chapel in the 12th century. Joseph of Arimathea is mentioned in all four Gospels as the wealthy man who donated his own prepared tomb that became the Holy Sepulchre. Some say Joseph of Arimathea was Jesus' uncle, because he acted like a family member in this regard. In any case, these are the walls that remain from St. Mary's Chapel, and here are its dimensions in English feet. The dimensions fit the canonical numbers, just like Stonehenge. The original chapel's ground plan resonates with a double Vesica Pisces like we saw in the analysis of the Great Seal of the United States. Thinking of the legend, I overlaid a 5 by 12 rectangle with X's inside that we'll see later in Jerusalem, and I discovered that it closely fits the double Vesica Pisces. Perhaps there is truth to the legend of St. Joseph of Arimathea after all. St. Mary's seems to bear the stamp of the Jerusalem rectangle. If shifting the decimal place in the canonical numbers doesn't matter, then there must be something special about the decimal system. Consider Pythagoras' motto, "All is number." The most sacred symbol in the Pythagorean secret worship of number was the tetractys. The diagram consists of points arranged in 4 rows, with 1, 2, 3, and 4 points in each successive row. The tetractys symbolizes the 4 elements, encodes pure musical intervals, is the seed for understanding the harmony of the cosmic spheres, and represents the structure of space itself. The sum of the points in the tetractys is 10. The decimal system we use today, known as base 10, utilizes 9 digits plus 0 as a placeholder. In fact, the word digit comes from the Latin digitus, which means finger. We naturally assume base 10 must have arisen from the practice of counting on fingers. Peter Plichta, who is both a physicist and a chemist, has shown in his book God's Secret Formula that there is much more to the decimal system beyond the physiology of our hands. Believe it or not, the decimal system hinges on the number 81. To understand this, bear with me for a moment and see how all the numbers in the decimal system are hiding under 81. Starting with the decimal point, line up all the numbers sequentially like this. The numbers beyond 9 are shown in parentheses because they are not yet in the decimal place system of single digits. Carrying each parenthesized digit into the decimal system yields a repeating decimal. This infinitely repeating number is equal to the reciprocal of 81. All the numbers really are hiding under 81. This is especially significant because there are exactly 81 stable elements in the universe, no more, no less. The periodic table of the elements lists the elements beyond 83 as subject to radioactive decay, but most are unaware of the fact that unstable elements 43 and 61 don't exist anywhere in the universe unless they are synthesized. Plichta was the first to make this connection, and also points out that all 81 stable elements are categorized into 10 types of isotopes, which is another reference to the decimal system. So Pythagoras was right. All is number, and the numbers are in base 10. Rena Shesso's book, Math for Mystics, points out some relevant spooky facts. Not only does the moon move through space 81 times faster than the Earth, but the moon has 1/81st the mass of Earth. Am I alone in thinking this is just too perfect? She also points out that the magic square of the moon is a 9 by 9 square having 81 numbers. Magic squares go back at least 2,600 years to ancient China. I get the feeling all of this was known in the distant past. While kids count to 10 on their fingers, theoretical physicists talk about 10-dimensional superstrings, and Kabbalists talk about 10 sephiro on the Tree of Life. They are all recounting the decimal structure of the universe from different points of view. Traveling a short distance along the Nile, we come to Dashur, site of the lesser-known red and bent pyramids. Egyptologists claim these were contemporaneous with the Great Pyramid of Giza. I think the sacred geometry of both pyramids was correctly deciphered at world-mysteries.com. The pyramids at Dashur hold keys to macrocosm and microcosm. First of all, the red pyramid isn't as steep as the Great Pyramid. Its face proportions match this red triangle within a pentagram. Tilting up 4 such triangles until they meet defines the pyramid and its slope. The pentagram is a powerful magical talisman that was a symbol of the Pythagorean school. The pentagram encodes the golden number phi within itself fractally. Phi is one of the most important numbers in mathematics, because nature uses it to proportion everything from pine cones to sunflowers and nautilus shells. Even our bodies are based on the golden section. The number 5 is associated with the microcosm, with life and in the growth of living things. The adjacent bent pyramid is the only pyramid with 2 slope angles. The lower slope is steeper than the Great Pyramid, and its face proportions match this blue triangle within a hexagon. Tilting up 4 such triangles until they meet defines the pyramid's lower slope. The upper slope matches the red pyramid, so it's red triangles within pentagons again here. So what's up with all the hexagons and pentagons? It has been said that the great enigma of alchemy is the mystery between macrocosm and microcosm. The word alchemy actually comes from al-chemi, which means the way of Egypt. I believe relating 6 to 5 is the essential key encoded at Dashur. Renaissance master Albrecht Dürer made this drawing in his course in the art of measurement with compasses and a ruler. Everything emerges from the Vesica Pisces. Dürer's Melancholia I is one of the most studied pieces of esoteric art. Franz Deckwitz presented the following analysis in 1979 to John Michel, who published it in his 1988 book, The Dimensions of Paradise. The opening of the compasses is the key to the engraving's metrology. The compasses, sphere, measuring stick, and overall proportions all fit the same unit. As already mentioned, the engraving's proportions of 14 to 11 match the Great Pyramid's half-triangle proportion. The objects in the engraving are packed with Hermetic symbolism, but the most interesting thing to me is the hidden controlling geometry. It's the alchemical wedding of pentagon and hexagon. Schwaller de Lubix did this study of an Egyptian gateway. Notice the proportions of 6s and 5s in the opening, and the octave height of 2 compared to the overall width of a fundamental 1. Henry Lincoln co-wrote Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which became an inspiration for Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, published more than 20 years later. In The Holy Place, Lincoln revealed what he calls a structured landscape in the former Cathar country surrounding the mysterious village of Rennes-le-Château. Again we see the marriage of 6 and 5. The pentagram over the cube in DC is another representation of 6 and 5 coming together. Recall how triple 6s and 5s are encoded in the Washington Monument as 6,660 inches equals 555 feet. America's monumental obelisk therefore expresses the relationship between macrocosm and microcosm. Moving to a larger scale, the Earth encodes 6 to 5 in temporal and spatial terms. The Earth's precessional cycle measured in years, divided by the Earth's equatorial circumference measured in nautical miles, is precisely equal to 6 divided by 5. Alex B. Geddes discovered relationships in the solar system that express the macrocosm's relationship to the microcosm. These are published in John Martineau's superb Little Book of Coincidence. The relationships Geddes found are ratios between the products of mean orbital radii of planets in our solar system. More specifically, the ratios each equal 6 divided by 5, plus a small factor that must be added in each case to balance the equalities. Each product is a symmetrical relationship between inner rocky planets and outer gas giants. I notice that each one of the factors added to balance the equalities encodes 864. The same number you learned in the Stonehenge and San Francisco episodes is the number of the sun. How incredibly apropos. In mathematics, phi and pi are two of the most important numbers. They can be related in the following way. 6 divided by 5 times phi squared equals pi. This equation is an extremely accurate approximation, but is not exact, and as such is classified by mathematicians as a coincidence. Are all of these things just pure coincidence, or evidence of hyperdimensional resonance? For a more complete answer to that, you'll have to wait for the Paris episodes. For the next astonishing example of 6s over 5s, we'll visit the Holy City of Jerusalem.